Good afternoon. I would like to welcome all the participants. Ms. Annalise highlighted international standards in terms of gender equality, and I will try to focus in my report on how the gender equality is respected in Kyrgyzstan in legislation. And I would like to tell about contribution and role of the civil society organizations. And let me first to start about the situation with the status of women and men and where we have disbalances. And the social area, we have plenty of gender issues. First of all, it is a gap in life expectancy of men and women. It is a gap 8.2 years. Men live shorter than women, and it is associated with risky behavior and not a healthy behavior and attitude. Alcohol and addiction in 10 times higher among men, and mortality of male in age able to work is 3 times higher, and suicide rate is 3.6 times higher. But also talking about maternity and women health, will have some limitations. Reproduction rights of women, each every second woman affected by anemia, a pregnant woman, and there are high risks of the course of pregnancy and mortality rate during labor. And 1/3 of children are born outside the registered marriage. It means that father lives together, but people couple do not register their marriage, and there are also cases of family where they have polygamy. And the access to kindergartens is still serious problem. Access to kindergartens is still significant problem, especially in rural area.
На вот этом, да, ну вот здесь я отметила, что есть разные как бы проблемы с здравоохранением в том числе, да, и с вопросами насилия также мы можем отметить, что существует...
Point out that there are serious gender problems, a high rate of violence against women and girls. And another problem that still we have better practice of early forced marriages, and women feel less safe themselves, secured in our country. As to economy and access to resources, there are also gaps, and salary wages of women is much lower than women, and infographic shows only the pension and the salary, and we have 71.6% gap in salary, and the average only 14% of women they're the head of the households, and majority 90% of women capital concentrated in area of small business where high risk of a capital loss, and there is a violate a volatile the market has effect, and they can affect on women business, and it means that there are limited economic rights of women. As to policy and politics and legal area. Now we want to say about statistics of women representation in the management bodies and in the public service, and women underrepresented at the political and special positions, less than 25%, and it is a level where decisions are made. And at the same time, we have to say that level of education of women higher in average across the country, but their high educational capacity is not applied at the level of decision making. As to the local level municipality, situation is worse. Women in political positions, they are only 3.9%, and we know that now we do not have have akims, so the heads of municipalities represented by women, and etc. in the regions. And it is a low statistics that women are represented at the level of local authorities. As to the legislation body, the parliament and dynamics shows, unfortunately, Kyrgyzstan never ever reached the minimum 30% representation of women in the legislation body of the country. And moreover, we had periods when women were not presented in the parliament. And the impulse big, the jump was possible only when in 2007 gender quota were approved, adopted, and women representation was increased significantly. But as I said, we never had the 30% representation of women in the parliament. And compared to other countries, I would like to say that we do not improve our legislation and quotas in the parliament and quota legislation compared to other countries, we lose our positions. And we can see that among the CS countries, the former Soviet Union, we are only on the seventh position, and in on the international level, we get only 114, and the 64 countries in the world, they have more than 30% representation of women in the parliament. That is quite big number of the countries, and even there are countries with 50%. And I would like to show you this list, and there are no countries. As we saw Europe, as we used to see European countries, but there are countries from Africa, Latin America, Asia, and even Muslim country where they undertake significant efforts to increase number of women in the legislation body of the country. And in the local councils, statistics leveled only during the last elections, and it happened because a new special quota were approved to reserve 30% of mandates for women in rural councils. And in elections in 2021 showed that the share of women is 37%. And but before the previous elections, it was only 7%, maybe 10%, and it means that it was several times increased. And many women, they go through the school of leadership, they learn, and they will be promising stuff at the previous elections to the parliament, national parliament, and could be engaged in the system of public management, state management. As to the political parties, it is one of the institutions through which women can go, and men as well, to the parliament and local councils. Unfortunately, the parties are headed by men in the country, and the last recent elections in 2021, 75 parties and 21 party allowed to vote. To be voted, and they were included in the ballots. And two parties were headed by women, and none of the parties were elected in the parliament. And among the leaders of political parties, share of women is only 13%, but never we had a case that these parties could have won during elections and bring all members to the election body. And we can suppose that such a low representation of women in the governance is because women do not want to participate or to undertake a responsibility. But statistics on the heads of business structure show the different opposite situation, that even women in the competitive world and the strong strict market, they can be successful leaders of the business structures, especially we see in trade. And women, they able to be the leaders and take responsibility and make decisions in a for difficult situation, but conditions to be enabling. And the history of gender equality promotion in Kyrgyzstan was launched actively since 1995, when delegation of Kyrgyzstan attended the fourth World Conference on Women Status in Beijing. Before, we were a part of the Soviet Union, and delegation of the Soviet Union attended. But now it is first time when delegation of independent Kyrgyzstan attended the UN platform platform and saw that the whole world goes towards to this goal. Members of delegation took big efforts to promote in the country gender issues. And in 1996, the decree of the president announced the Year of Women, and the national program to improve situation of women was adopted. The State Commission on Family, Women and Youth Matters was set up, and the first compendium statistic of women and men of Kyrgyz Republic was released, and it is published annually. And the next years, 1996-97, five UN conventions, key UN conventions were ratified on women rights, on political rights of women, on consent to and marriage, about the marriage age and registration of marriage, and of course CEDAW Convention. And then further, in 2003, it is very important milestone. The two key laws were approved on basis of the state guarantees to ensure gender equality, and the law on social legal protection against violence in the family. And the progress was very serious, because the law on domestic violence was proposed to introduce, and members of the parliament, they said, we do not have any violence, everything is excellent, and none of MPs wanted to initiate such draft law. And the civil society organizations, women organizations, submitted the draft law through the People's Initiative, and 38,000 signatures were collected. And at the time, according to Constitution, it was enough to have 30,000, but we collected 38,000 more, and it is only one in the history of Parliament when such a draft law was submitted through the People Initiative. And when it was submitted to the Parliament, and we had huge number of the signatures, and these laws were anonymously adopted, and then we got the legal framework for implementation of gender equality in the country. In 2007, according in the framework of constitution reform, the article was introduced in the constitution with CEDAW requirement on that women and men they possess equal rights and opportunities, and the state guarantees this equality. And before we didn't have such article, and we always got from CEDAW committee such recommendation. In 2007, first time the gender quota introduced to elections in the parliament, but I will tell about it later in details. But I would like to say that all this legislation changes. Actually, it is the alive process, vibrant process, and it is created by people, and a great role given to the civil society and citizens. And I would like to show one example case. And by result of parliamentary elections in 2005, it was a solidarity system. None of the women got a seat in the parliament, and we had a very strange situation that the country's legislation level provide women electoral rights, but at the same time in the parliament, women are not presented at all, and we do not have such cases across the world. And 2.5 years we lived fully with masculine parliament, with male parliament, and in the issues of gender equality and political rights of women, they had rhetoric nature, and the state didn't want to take any measures to improve the situation. And then the women movement uh, they had the just dilemma, and in order to make the male parliament to take decisions discriminatory against women, and then dialogue was initiated with the president, and after meeting with women organizations, the president said up the special institute, the special representative of the president on gender development issues in the parliament, and he told to nominate candidates. We gave three nominees, and he appointed the first from this list, Anara Niyazova. You see her on the picture, and she worked with the male parliament 2.7 years, and many issues. Risky issues which were highlighted with the help of this institute helped to avoid and also the methodology of gender expertise of the legislation was developed. It was initiated by Anara Niyazova, and when the question was highlighted to have such gender expertise, and immediately the idea was born to set up standards on other types of expertise, and the five specialized expertise were approved. It is a legal, human rights, gender, environmental, anti-corruption expertise of the draft laws, and these standards the government approved, and they adopted such expertise for the regulations and bylaws also to in the parliament. And then anyway, it was a question how to do that women they come in the parliament. And I remember that women organizations and other legal human rights organizations, they started to carry out and conduct gender campaigns, and different methods were used, not only traditional to impose in the working groups and the task force a new code on elections and some appeals, but also they use the symbolic campaigns and actions, and one of them many of my colleagues they remember it was alternative 8th of March went to the male parliament activists. They came, and in the morning they they gave as a gift of flowers to men MPs, and this campaign was highlighted in the mass media broadly. The members of the parliament they didn't understand what does it mean, and activists explained if you would be a woman, we will be happy to congratulate, but there are no women in the parliament, and we call you to ensure gender equality and to undertake gender measures. And this campaign was broadly highlighted in mass media, and we were on main headlines of the newspaper, and many journalists wrote articles about this campaign, and this problem was also articulated. And during the male parliament, when we had threats, it was proposed to withdraw from the constitution the concept of secular society state, or for example, to withdraw from criminal code article on polygamy, but they're very important in terms of gender mainstreaming, and symbolic campaigns were organized, and symbolic means of women struggle were used, that it is like bed leaning on the rope, and we referred to international commitments of Kyrgyzstan and our laws, and work wide to address issues either to keep or introduce in these campaigns were broadly supported by youth organizations. On this picture you see near the building where the constitutional meeting took place, the young activists came, and any member of the Constitution Council could see requirements that circularity should be maintained and saved, and we succeeded. Also examples of other campaigns when we used different picture boards where we could take pictures, and it was Polaroid, and all activists and political figures they also made their statements, and signatures from the citizens were collected that in the parliament women to be presented, and during parliamentary public hearings where the code on elections will discuss from 28 speakers, 24 representatives of the society were different men and women, youth, and representatives of people with disabilities, and actually they talk that it is not normal that we have male parliament and we need quota. And in presidium we had men MPs, and they had smiles and said never ever we will have such a things. But less than 1 year was over past, and gender quota became reality. And for me, it is a lesson learned that never we should give up, and sometimes
Может быть, это
seems to
признак
you
того,
that nothing will happen and will not succeed, but then significant changes can take place, and together we can manage and get success. And these are examples of other campaigns, and this is a very important movement, Zebra campaign, where we collected the signatures, and symbol of a campaign logo is zebra, to have in the list the term by order to have women and men names in the list of political parties, and we had representatives of the regions, and many people supported and endorsed this idea. And as a result, today we have different special measures from legal point of view. In the parliament, there is a requirement that in the parties list to have also 30% in city councils, village rural councils, also to have 30%. And in bodies where the positions are appointed, we discuss the Central Election Commission in the Supreme Court, Chamber of Accounts, and even as to the deputy of ombudsman person, also to have a people with different sex. And now it is just as one list, but it is the strong movement was behind of individuals and the whole organizations to promote this agenda. And UN lobby actively, this link was used, liquid CEDAW 4.1 articles as a special measures, procedures, to ensure equality of discriminated sex is not discrimination, but and we heard arguments were often that what is the discrimination of men. They had misunderstanding in political establishment, but nevertheless, existence of such provision in situ allowed us to argue, to dispute that we ratified this convention, and so it is not discrimination, and we have to use broader, different special measures. And later on, starting from 2008, the new law was adopted on gender equality. It was complemented with different mechanisms and provisions to have the body in the regions, and the constitutional reform of the uh, provisions were updated on gender important articles, and in 2000 the 12th, the National Long-Term Strategy was adopted till 2020. Now we have the strategy till 2030, and the Mother's Day was introduced through decree of the President, and the National Council on Gender Equality was formed. In 2017, the new version of the law on domestic violence with amendments in 10 other laws were approved. It was a comprehensive reform in 2017, and it was in 2017 we had a mechanism where we could substitute vacancy of mandates by the sex of the deputy. For example, the first MP, woman, and instead of her, man came MP, and we lost elected in the parliament women, but we had that woman, if she gone, another woman come. And also in 2019 we introduced mechanism of reserving 30% of seats in the local council for women. This campaign lasted for several years. In 2016, it was a public discussion of the draft law in the regions that we need to introduce such mechanism in the legislation, and more than 10,000 signatures were introduced, and a very actively information campaign was organized to support this gender quota, and different events were organized, and I will not show them separately, but we had everywhere in the parliament, and it was what in mass media, and we had different symbolic campaigns and actions, and deputies of local councils in the building of the parliament, they articulated this issue when they met with MPs from different sides. This topic was discussed, highlighted on TV, radio, social media, and the messages were used. Everything was targeted to the thing that to give women opportunity at the local level to be elected, and whether to reserve mandates is necessary. And then later, from the news, we got a National Council on Women Rights and Prevention of Gender Violence under the Speak of the Parliament, and the program to support women entrepreneurship was adopted, and today we have Constitution Article 24, and it has a special article which guarantees equality of women and men, and provides equal opportunities, and the law of Kyrgyz Republic on gender equality gives definition that the principle at the level of the legislation, the concept is followed, that equal rights to be ensured by equal opportunities and to bring to equal results. And also we have to mention the strategic documents. They are also separate block or work of the civil society. When so important strategic documents are adopted, and we needed to have goals and as to gender equality, to the strategy of 2040 on development, and we have our paragraph of what is our vision of the future of the country, and that in the country we will have equal
That
women.
Kyrgyzstan would have a good provision of equality in political, social, and economic life, and there are programs on the support of gender equality and the elimination of discrimination in relation to men and women. Another example that I would like to give from other area, but as I said, my report is more focused on how the country implements the rights that are already included into national and international standards and the requirement, the convention, CEDAW, yeah, Article 10, that the participants should eliminate all stereotype concept of men and women in all level of training programs and in all forms of training programs. And we keep receiving recommendations from CEDAW committee that our training program still contains stereotypes, and therefore the government has to take action accordingly. Our constitution also does not allow promotion of gender inequality, gender stereotypes, gender supremacy, but the gender stereotypes in education is considered to be indirect gender discrimination. It's actually prohibited by the constitution. And also we had a measure that aimed at the need to implement anti-discrimination gender expertise of the training materials. All of that gave an opportunity to promote this norm, but how it was done. The role of monitoring, I want to say, is very important because we need to get the proof of the violations. We should document it. And for gender monitoring of the textbooks at schools in 2007 to 2018, we had a pilot independent monitoring in the framework of the project of Adenauer Foundation and European Union. There were some preliminary methodological tools developed, and the first evidence that our school textbooks are really full of all kinds of stereotypes and gender inequality text. And we were able to actually build a case to the government and explain that this has to be addressed. And in the mass media, actually, There were also some evidence posted by people about discriminatory pictures or discriminatory content in the books and the textbooks at school. So as a result, in 2019, the work has continued. The methodology was developed and it was piloted. Another important milestone is the cooperation with our development partners. For example, here you can see that the European Union at that time and now is providing enormous actually help to the education sector through the swap mechanisms. And then delegation of European Union has been participating in the discussion on the educational reforms that it should include institutionalization of gender expertise. And this was included in the indicators of the budget support that was really linked in particular to the certain amount of money. And if the government would not fulfill this indicator, we would simply not get this funding. So this was significant motivation for our Ministry of Education in order to support actually to institutionalization of this gender monitoring mechanisms and tools. And our development partners have provided support in this relation. In 2019, there was a provision about the order of this gender monitoring. The methodology has developed at the Republican Scientific Practical Center called Kyrgyz KTB. This is a Oku KTB. This is the center that is responsible for the textbooks, and they are currently responsible for this gender expertise. And for an illustration, here are the number of examples. Here, what are the gender stereotypes? And you could see that I already mentioned that this is indirect discrimination. For example, that our school textbooks, they show more of diversity of men, roles, and activities, while for women, these roles are a lot less, actually. They're very limited. So, for example, you can see this is the topic of profession, and those 7 types of professions, we can see only male professions demonstrated here. Or the second picture, this is the topic of the leisure time, and of the 7 options of leisure time, we can only see leisure time, but the boys. Seems like girls do not have any leisure time. Of course, the authors probably did not want to promote this idea, but actually, this is what we see. And when children are using these textbooks to study, they start to really absorb these concepts, the social concepts, where men seem to have a lot more opportunities compared to women. But at the same time, you can see these are female roles that are represented by these traditional types of occupations, mainly limited by family and household, and very rarely that women can be represented in the same roles as men. As for the lessons on history, they do not reflect anyhow the participation of women in historical, economic, and political development. It's all about violence, etc. Textbooks on math, physics, etc. mostly describe males rather than females. They also demonstrate that such sciences as physics, mathematics, or chemistry mainly designed for boys. So in the illustrations you can see, we only see boys, and again, this is subconsciously translating or giving a message or communicating a message that all of this is for men. Of course, in some textbooks, there are some parts that try to show diversity. For example, accessibility. The new textbooks try to do that, but in the old textbooks, of course, we don't see anything. Even the covers of the books mainly show the active role of men and boys, again, making girls invisible. As a result of this anti-discrimination and gender expertise, which is now required expertise, so any project of the textbook have to go through this expertise. This expertise is done by independent expert. They should not be subordinate to the Ministry of Education or Kyrgyz Educational Academy, and they should follow the methodology. And based on the expertise, the category will be tried at A, B, or C. A is when everything is fine in terms of the human rights. So depending on this category, C you see is red, If it's highly discriminatory in terms of illustration and context, this book is not going to be allowed for further publishing. B is controversial and needs some changes and improvements. And A, of course, is the proper textbook that is allowed for publishing. So we had an expertise of 61 textbook projects, and we can see the results. We have been working with the authors of these books, and they were able to introduce improvements, and 53 were kind of in the middle and required improvements, but 8 textbooks or draft textbooks already were in a category A. Also, I would like to say how we as a civil society organizations can participate in the protection of the human rights in all kinds of spheres, not only in gender, but elsewhere. I try to show the scheme, how and where we can work. We can work on the level of international standards, for example, if we talk about UN conventions, we can provide alternative reports, we can participate in the sessions, we can come up with our own initiatives, and in some ways, we can even advocate for adopting some new conventions. For example, we're currently developing the Convention on Violence, which will include particular mechanisms related to the violence, which probably would be additional protocol to the CEDAW. And as civil society organizations, we participate and contribute to this process significantly. We can also participate in the monitoring of implementation. Again, we can apply alternative reports to our own studies, and also we can do expertise. Part of these norms, of course, will be implemented in our national legislation. And our national legislation, again, this is also the process. It changes, new things are coming, new threats are coming, and new opportunities are emerging. So we always have to be informed. We have to keep up with the pace. We always have to have the package of offers or suggestions of improvements. And we always have to be ready to contribute. So maybe if it's related to some other tools. And I think the adoption of the comprehensive anti-discriminatory law will so much improve the legal framework in Kyrgyzstan. And also we need to promote the gender significant provisions in other legislations and other regulations, norms and regulations. Again, that's what we can do. We can do the expertise, we can do the monitoring and lobby changes or amendments. The next level is the level of implementation. This could be national or could be special, for example, on the women's entrepreneurship or other areas, all kinds of rights, decision-making, gender. So that's where we can participate in all kinds of functions. We can do the monitoring and how government is successful in implementing all of those commitments that were approved, and public monitoring here is highly important. On the other hand, we also can be someone who provides services to those who have the rights, for example, lawyers, protections, consultations, or assistance to the survivors of violence. So that is when we, together with the government and municipal bodies, can become the service providers. And of course, what is also very important is to do the monitoring of the law enforcement activities. They actually have to do the supervision and control and should enforce the law, but in many cases, and it often happens, we can see this, they can also be the source of discrimination and violation. That's why we need to do the monitoring, train them, strengthen their capacity, raise their awareness so that they would know how they can best implement their responsibility, fulfill their responsibilities. So our civil society sector is quite diverse. I think we have organizations who work in all levels, in all spheres. But for us, it's very important, I think, to cooperate and to unite our efforts. And I believe that together we will be able to achieve a lot. Thank you very much for your attention.